coming up on
If
today's
they tell you
episode?
it's included, it should be written on the contract.
Okay.
Like for roofing, like we're going to replace your roof, and yeah, we normally include like maybe 4 sheets of plywood. If it's not written in that contract, they can still charge you for it. Again, a contract is of utmost importance. Don't ever do anything to your home without having something in writing.
This is the You Ask, the Pros Answer podcast. Do you have questions about an upcoming exterior contracting project? We've got answers. Welcome to the You Ask, the Pros Answer podcast. All right, everyone. Hey, welcome to episode 2 of the You Ask, the Pros Answer podcast. Your questions answered by the pros you trust. We're doing it. It's happening. Episode 2. Didn't know if we would get to this point, but we're here. And again, I am joined by owner and president of Pro Exteriors, Aaron Rogers. Aaron, welcome. How are you?
I'm great, Cole. How are you?
I am 5x5.
There you go.
I learned a new phrase last week that Aaron taught me, and I'm trying to use it in the correct ways.
Yep.
All right, Aaron. So this podcast, I don't think I'm young enough to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. This podcast officially dropped last week, and I think we've had like tens of listeners so far. So I'm pretty excited about that. We answered this question last week, but I want to ask it again for the people that are just joining in today, whether they're watching or listening. We are an exterior contracting company based in Sussex County, Delaware, so we're on the coast there. And why did we think it was a good idea to start another podcast, to throw our pod into the ocean that is full of podcasts already?
Ooh, great question. So, in reality, I think there's a ton of options out there. I think there's a ton of misinformation, and I think that ultimately, having a source that you can trust that's local or maybe not so local, that you can kind of refer back to help you with any projects that you have. Whether we can just give you information, whether we can actually physically help you on your house, we're here to help.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to that. We are both real people. We are not AI generated, although I don't know how we can prove that. But, just look at us and you can tell that no artificial intelligence generated us, as I laugh at my own joke. Okay, so the premise of this podcast is that each week we are just going to answer as honestly as we can a question that we receive from our customers, prospective clients, homeowners. They're probably questions that we've asked at some point as well. And we're just going to try to have an honest conversation in hopes that by the end of each week, we all know a little bit more than we did when we came in. So today, Aaron, you are the expert in this. The question that I have is, how do I find a reliable contractor? So I asked the question, and I'm going to stop you before you even answer. I want to walk you through just some of the things that I've thought maybe are a good idea, of way to kind of whittle out some of the chaff, so to speak. But just in general, how would you say it's best to find a reliable, trustworthy contractor?
Well, in the age of technology, easiest thing to do would be to Google it. Obviously, Google is a resource for just about everything. So the quickest and easiest way to look for anything, obviously, is going to be Google.
I want to share a quick story with you, Aaron, and then I'll obviously everybody that's listening and watching will be able to experience this as well. I was just telling Aaron before we started recording that I was on a road trip this past weekend taking my daughter to camp. About an hour and a half from home, the car died on the side of I-71 South. Cars are going by me at like 80 miles an hour. I am literally praying out loud as I'm under the hood of my car, please don't let this 18-wheeler that's coming by ram into me. Anyway, long story short, we have roadside assistance with our insurance company. They recommended a garage. Turns out it was Pilot, one of the truck stops. That was the company they recommended. I didn't need a Gatorade and like a sub, and I don't have a diesel truck. So I had to go on Google while standing on the side of the road because the insurance company would not send a tow truck until I gave them the name and address of a mechanic. I promise this
Oh,
story is pertinent to what we're talking about. So I went to Google and searched mechanics near me. Came up with one. They had a few Google reviews, like maybe 25 or 30, but they were positive. Well, about midnight that night, I am home. Dawn, my wife, had come to pick me up, brought me home. My car's still sitting on the side of I-71 South with the keys in it because that's the only way the tow truck driver could get it. He calls me, the tow truck driver, from the garage that I had sent my car to. And he says, I can't do a South, like Ohio accent, but he's like, "Bud, I don't think you want me to leave your car here." And he's like, "Check your messages. I'm sending you a picture of the place right now. And I want to show you. I don't know how well you can see this.
oh,
Essentially, it's an abandoned gas station turned garage.
I like it.
And needless to say, I am incredibly grateful to this stranger that is the tow truck driver because I did not leave the car there. He took it back to their tow yard and then he found a shop close by the next morning. All that to say, I went to Google and in that instance, it wasn't super helpful. And I don't know what happened. So I hear what you're saying. You're saying that Google can be a good resource. What are some of the other ways that you can kind of investigate?
Oh man. So obviously, anywhere you go, you've got to check your resources. So if you go to Google, if you go to social media, you can ask friends and family. You can ask a local Facebook group if they have any recommendations. Um, but you still have to dial that in. You still have to do your research, and ultimately, if you call it a handful of companies, you still have to figure out whether those people are reputable. Um, and in order to do that, you're going to you're going to deep dive into some other places. You can call the Department of Corporations for the state of Delaware. You can call the IRS. The IRS will tell you whether or not they have back taxes. You can do just a further Google search into that specific company. You can go to the Better Business Bureau. You can go to Yelp. Ultimately, you're just trying to narrow down into kind of a handful of people that you ultimately want to have a larger conversation with. And then even from there, once you actually meet with these people, that's when you're going to kind of narrow it down even further. Reputable companies don't hide anything, so they should have no issue whatsoever showing you their business license, their insurance, which insurance is something we can dive into a little bit more just because there is more to just showing you proof of insurance. Can you give me some references? I always like to tell people you shouldn't just get references from what you consider to be potential people that they've worked for, because if I gave you the names of 6 of my friends and you call them and you ask them, what do you think of Aaron? At least 5 of those people are going to give you positive feedback. So I always like to suggest, take it a step further. Ask them where they buy the lion's share of their supplies. Ask them who they bank with. There's tons of different ways. If they're certified with a manufacturer, you can call the local manufacturing rep and kind of dive in it a little bit deeper that way. Those people have a little bit less vested into giving you any sort of lies or we'll say massaging of the truth.
Gotcha.
If you call a supplier and those people haven't paid their bill and they've got an overdue credit account and they're now cash only, the supplier typically is not going to give you the most positive or glowing review. If you call their bank and their bank says, no, they're a great customer, they're not going to give you as much information, obviously, because there's a few more laws in place for them. But they'll still give you information. Manufacturing reps, also pretty good source of information. And if they don't have anything positive to say about the people, then chances are they can probably give you a recommendation for guys that they would recommend. So in all reality, I think it's kind of a multi-step process in reality to kind of get the information you want.
Yeah, I appreciate all of that. There's some really good stuff in there. And I don't want our listeners to hear me saying that Google's not a good resource, because uh, again, that was my first place. That was my first thought was, oh, I need to go to Google. And look, when you're searching on Google, what are some good suggestions on kind of sifting through the thousands of responses or hits that Google will give you back when you search for, let's say, roofing contractor in my area or reputable contractor in my area? What are some of the tips that you might have for looking through that? Are you looking at number of reviews? Are you looking at the star rating of the reviews? What would you
Yeah.
recommend there?
So I typically look at number of reviews, and then I kind of look at the average. If there's in the instance of roofers, if there's 10 roofers kind of at the top of the list, what's the average of those 10 roofers? And then I'm going to kind of look at the guys that kind of fit that mold. And then I'll look at what the individual ratings are. Do they have a 4.5, a 4.9? There are companies out there that have several hundred reviews and have a 5.0 rating with Google, which is outstanding. Typically, you're going to be pretty safe with going with a company like that. Other things I like to look at is like how many years in business.
Hmm.
I also really, really enjoy people that have an actual address listed. There'll be times where, in the service industry specifically, you'll have people that kind of service an area, but that's not really their main area. Um, so if, for instance, you look for auto mechanics in Milton, Delaware, you're probably going to come up with a handful of local shops. If you look for plumbers in Milton, Delaware, you're probably going to come up with 20 or 30 shops. And some of those people are, they could be based out of Salisbury, they could be based out of Dover, they could be based out of Wilmington. But since they service this area, technically they're still going to come up. Now, not to say that they're not great quality companies, but I always choose to do business with a place that I can physically drive to, show up, pay them in person if come down to it. I like to do business face to face. I like to work with businesses that actually have a place that I can visit. And then you look at the actual reviews. Click on the link for the reviews. Me personally, I usually always click on the 1-star reviews. If somebody has 1-star
Mm-hmm.
reviews, I read them with a grain of salt. My company has received some 1-star reviews over the years. Some of them, I have no idea who the people are. They're not in our system. They aren't actually customers. Every once in a while, you'll get competitors that'll give people 1-star reviews. Or sometimes you can just tell that the person who left the 1-star review isn't the nicest person. So you can usually read through those, but every once in a while you will get a good company that gets a 1-star review that's
Sure.
100% warranted. They took my check and it was 3 years later when they actually finished the project. Or, this happened and they backed into my car and they, didn't tell me, and then I had to fight them in court in order to get paid for it. Things like that. You can learn a lot from reading really bad reviews. And then you can also look at how the company responds to those reviews. So how they respond ultimately can tell you the type of people they are. If they give a generic response, then they probably don't care so much. But yeah, I mean, again, you can go down rabbit holes with every company you want to work with, and you can do that same exact process on Google for Yelp and for Facebook. And I mean, if you Google just about any company, you're going to get probably at least 100 different websites that have information about those companies.
Sure.
And I would say 60% of them are going to be accurate, and the other 40% are just pulling random information from.
All right. So we're still on the surface. We have not uh, committed, or we have not even asked for a quote or an estimate from a company. We're still kind of in the gathering the names. I want to stick there for a minute. So Facebook is obviously one of those platforms that can be used for a lot of good, can also be
Yep.
used for a lot of bad, just like
Agreed.
most things. Are you a fan of putting it out there on your own Facebook feed saying, hey, I'm looking for an electrician in Milton. Anybody have any recommendations?
I do that quite often. I do it sometimes just to get a conversation started. I have some really amazing, reputable guys that have been working for us for years. I love them, have no reason to change, but I always think it's wise to make sure you have backups for backups.
Sure.
Um, and ultimately, you can also get a sense of what people are looking for. If you get sometimes asking for recommendations is a really really good way to learn who not to use. People are a lot more likely to leave a negative review
Yep. Yep.
than they are to leave a positive review. Um, that years and years and years ago, I can't remember the exact guy who told me, but they were saying that if you do a good job for somebody, they're likely to tell a couple other people if the conversation happens to come up. We do a really good job on someone's roof, and so and so's they're at lunch with so and so, and they're talking about potentially need to get the roof done. They go, "Oh, the guy did mine, did pretty good." Flip that, you do a really bad job for somebody, and their roof leaks, and guy gets caught peeing in the bushes, and the dumpster scrapes the driveway. Those people will tell everybody willing to give them 3 minutes.
Yep. Yep.
They will call people to tell everyone about their experience. They'll lean into the people sitting next to them at lunch to tell them the story.
They'll post it on Facebook. They'll tag the company. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. They'll write a letter to their pen pal. Email a congressman. So it's an odd thing. People go out of their way to leave negative reviews, and positive reviews seem to be a little bit more difficult to get a handle on. So,
all right. So we're still trying to gather a list of companies. Last week we touched on this, and we haven't even clicked yet on any one of the links that have popped up on Google. We haven't even clicked on any of the Facebook pages of companies that friends and family have recommended. What is the target that you're looking for, or that you would recommend, the number of companies that you contact to get an estimate?
So I always recommend 3.
Okay.
And you kind of have to have your own set of parameters in place before you start calling around. What's your timeline? What are there specific products that you want? If you call a company that doesn't actually install that brand of product or that style of product, then you're wasting their time and your own. So kind of knowing what you need and what you want, knowing what your timeline is, these are really, really good things to give the person on the other end of the phone to figure out whether or not they can even meet your needs.
Mm-hmm.
Time is the most valuable resource you have. You can't buy it. You can't get any more of it. You can't make any more. So, don't waste your own time. Don't waste their time. But yeah, find a couple of companies that kind of fit those parameters, that fit your timeline, that can offer you the services and the brands that ultimately you want to utilize, and then schedule a time where you can sit down and meet with them. Depending how large of a purchase is, you may meet with the first person and they can meet your needs at a number you feel confident with, and you may sign with them right there on the spot. Larger purchases, most people tend to get multiple prices so they can compare apples to apples. And you will 100% get a kind of a very large range of pricing. The more quotes you get, the larger that range will get. So getting too many estimates is not good either. Again, if you get 5, 6 estimates, I think the most we've ever seen was 9 estimates.
9 estimates?
9 estimates. Guy had a spreadsheet, and he got 9 total. We didn't find that out until after we submitted our bid. He's like, all right, I'll be in touch. We called him a few days later, and he said he's just waiting on his last one. He said that'll give all 9 of you guys will have the opportunity to give your price. And I was like, wow, you got 9 prices? And he says, well, I only got 8, but I got one more coming. So,
I've done less research for college papers.
Yeah, I mean, when you get that many quotes, even if you were to get 5 quotes, the chances of being able to do a true comparison of apples to apples is it's not great. 3 quotes is pretty easy. Typically, you're going to get, most of the time you can get quotes that are relatively close. But every once in a while, you'll get 2 that are, kind of in the same range, and you'll get one that's kind of way, way off, either way high or way low. So getting 3 quotes kind of gives you a a guideline as far as like what ultimately the price should cost.
All right, so we're suggesting that maybe you get about 3 estimates, but we still haven't found a company yet. Let's say we Google reliable contractor in my area. That's kind of general. We're, maybe it's reliable roofer, reliable decking company, siding, windows, doors. Usually on Google, you will see a number of links pop up, and below the names, it'll say sponsored,
Yep.
which most likely, not most likely, which that just means that the company is paying to have their link populate towards the top of the page, right?
Correct.
Doesn't necessarily say that it's a great company, doesn't necessarily say that it's a crummy company. It's just what it is, that the company's choosing to put some of its marketing dollars toward Google.
That's accurate.
Um, let's say you click on the first link, it takes you to their website. What are some of the things that you are looking for on that company's website to tell you whether A, they're a legit company, B, you would trust them to do the work that they say they're going to do, and just kind of talk a little bit, if you could, about how much stock you put in the website.
Okay. So typically, I'm going to want to see a current website, and what I mean by that is I don't want to see a website that was built 5 years ago and hasn't been touched since. I'd like to see some active feed on there, whether it be blog posts, whether it be current photos. I like to see people. Me personally, and most consumers, people like to buy from people. So I want to see who the company is. If they've got an About Us page, I usually go and I read their backstory. I want to know how they started in the business, what's their reason for being in the business, those type of things. Again, some of this can be fluff, but for me, that's kind of one of the key things that I usually go and look at. Again, I want to see an actual address. I'm a firm believer that, even if you don't have a brick and mortar location, there should still be an address, a physical location that you can send stuff. So I always look for that. And then you can dive into, what are their total offerings? If they do roofing, typically you're not going to want to see them doing, bathrooms. If they're a plumber, typically you don't want to see them also doing drywall. So, are they a specialist in what they do, or are they kind of a jack of all trades? Which, nothing against jacks or trades, but you want to kind of dive into, what are they doing on a day-to-day basis?
Mm-hmm.
If they claim to be a plumber, like, they should just be doing plumbing. And then you can look at certifications and brands and things of that nature. Most people aren't going to post their business license and their insurance, but they typically are going to post like their actual license number. So for the state of Delaware, for the state of Maryland, both of those, you're required to have your license number posted publicly. So, if you think it's a good company, if you feel comfortable with the website, if it gives you warm, fuzzy feelings, then, add them to the list, and you can start to do a little bit more research. Or, you bite the bullet and you just go ahead and schedule an appointment. You meet with them and you base it off the feeling you get when they're actually in the home. You can do all the research in the world. At the end of the day, the guy that comes out and actually meets you, you may just not like the guy. I mean, it happens.
Yeah, it might be a great company, and yet the representative that you meet face to face with, they are the company for all intents and purposes, right?
Agreed.
Yeah, so trust your gut, especially knowing that most likely that man or woman is going to end up being the one that's your point of contact, or in your home and in your, in your sanctuary, as you called the home last week. So you mentioned you want to see an up-to-date website. That was one of the things. I would even say, especially in 2024, as we're recording this, finding their social links is one thing that, seeing how up to date their social media is. And I'm not going to say that you have to have an awesome social media presence, but it's the low hanging fruit these days. It doesn't cost you a dime to start a Facebook or an Instagram account, and it can help you get to know the people behind the company sometimes as well.
Agreed.
You mentioned the licenses and insurance. A few minutes back, you mentioned maybe we would talk a little bit more about that. What are some of the things? There's like a baseline that you have to hit to even do business in the state that you're in. But then what are you looking for over and above that?
So obviously each state has their own requirements as far as licensing goes. The state of Maryland, you're required to get to actually take a test to become a Maryland home improvement contractor or a Maryland builder.
And that's MHIC, right? You'll see that all over
Yep.
the place. Okay.
Yeah. And even with doing sales in the state of Maryland, they have a salesperson's license that's kind of under the MHIC license.
Okay.
Those are required to be displayed publicly. Same way with the state of Delaware. The state of Delaware is so ridiculously relaxed. This is a huge negative for the state of Delaware. Every contractor who is a legitimate contractor will tell you the same exact thing. They need to change their licensing laws. I always make the joke in the home with people that Delaware's business license laws are so ridiculous that we could sit at your dining room table and I could pay the $75 business license fee and I could have you with a temporary license printed out in your name. You are now a business owner in the state of Delaware in less than 15 minutes. Unfortunately, that's one of the reasons why, we're having this conversation is because anybody can be a contractor. Anybody, whether they've been in the industry for 20 plus years, whether they literally, got out of prison last week and decided that, they're really good with their hands, so they're going to be a contractor. If you go on Facebook, you go on Google, you can look at the amount of people that get ripped off on a weekly basis. There's almost never a week that goes by on, one of our most popular Facebook sites here locally is the Who Would You Refer Sussex County site. And there's almost never a week that goes by that there's not somebody on there posting about a contractor who took their money, and they're essentially looking for what recourse do they have. So, it's a very common thing. But so in the state of Delaware, you have a $75 license. 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I can't remember off the top of my head, they came out with a secondary contractor registration. This is a little bit more in depth, and it specifically targets contractors that are working like without insurance and are kind of misclassifying employees as subcontractors and, maybe paying people under the table. So it specifically targets that. The downfall to that is they're two separate licenses. You can operate under the $75 standard business license and do business all day, every day in the state of Delaware, and there's not really anything that's going to happen to you. So, it's $75 for the regular license. It's $200 for the contractor registration. But again, you can legally operate under that $75 license all day, every day. So there are ways that you can kind of look into that and figure out if your contractor is legitimate. He should obviously have both of those. If he's not so legitimate, he'll probably only be able to provide the one license. And again, different states around us. Virginia has like 3 or 4 different levels of license. It's all based upon, the size of the contracts and, your total gross revenue within the state. And then, all the way up to your top license, which you can pretty much do anything you need to. So, licensing is one of those things I hope the state of Delaware eventually kind of gets a little bit more stringent in. I firmly believe that every contractor should have to go through the test. It's not that difficult of a test, but it does require people to study, study and actually, pay the money to go get the test and consider themselves legit. So,
it shows that they have more skin in the game.
Exactly. You invest the time and the money, the energy to go actually there and be a legitimate contractor and learn the basics. It's not just about what you know about the products and the stuff that you install, but it's going to teach you specifically about the laws for your individual state. It's not just to protect the consumer, but it's also to protect yourself. People can scam you just as well as you can scam them. So, and then the other thing was insurance. So insurance is one of those things that's really easy to fake. Most people don't realize this because they just say, "Hey, can you give me proof of insurance?" It comes on this really nice, neat piece of paper called like an accord statement. They're fairly generic outside of the actual writing. So those things are only really good if you call and make sure they're actually real. So on that, you should have a couple of different things on there. You're going to want to see not only their general liability, which is kind of your standard business insurance. Every business pretty much has general liability, but then you're also going to want to see, you know, I would like to see their auto insurance on there as well.
Mm.
Any legitimate business should have a business vehicle. That business vehicle should be insured underneath the business name as well. And then the last one, which is super, super important, is your workers' comp. Workers' comp should be on there. Some places it's going to be a separate piece of paper, but workers' comp is super important for the consumer to be aware of, because if an employee gets hurt on your job site or in your yard, in your home,
Yeah.
and the business owner does not have workman's comp, you've got some skin in the game. They can go after the business owner and they can go after you as the actual property owner. But again, it's really, really easy to figure that out. If the guy you're hiring has a bunch of people coming to your house wearing his company shirt and working underneath his name, he 100% should be able to provide workman's comp, a proof of workman's comp insurance. So, asking somebody to see their insurance, I want to see all three. If you drive to my property, I want to see your auto insurance. If you're going to be working underneath a company name, I want to see your general liability license. And if it's more than just you coming into my house, I want to see workman's comp insurance. So those three things right there, if you can't provide proof of them, unfortunately, you're not reputable. You've got to cover those three things. It's not just for the business, but you as the consumer, these are the things that you need to make sure that that business is covering you as well as themselves. So, and again, anybody can show you a piece of paper. I know what they look like. You can Google what an accord statement is, and it'll pop up and show you exactly what the insurance paperwork looks like. If you can get a piece of paper of it, you can fake one. It's not that hard. My 12-year-old could most likely use standard Microsoft Paint and create an insurance document for you. So when you get that document, great. Now you've got the proof. Now just make sure the proof is actual proof.
Yeah. Yep.
The people they purchase it off, they should have a name, number, and address at the top. Give them a call. Make sure the policy is active. There used to be a running game back in the day where you could buy a 12-month policy, you pay your first premium, and you've got a piece of paper that says your policy is good for 12 months, and you've paid $96 for that, and then you never pay another payment. But on paper,
yep, you still got
on
that paper.
paper, you're covered.
Yeah.
That game still happens. Every once in a while, we will have people that stop in and they want to become a subcontractor for us, and we'll call and we'll check on their stuff, and the policy hasn't been active in many, many, many months. So again, get it in writing, get the paper, and then double check that it's accurate.
All right. So to this point, we've been talking a lot about foundational criteria to look for, like, is this company legit? Can they be trusted? Just from like a business standpoint, from a safety standpoint. We haven't really touched yet on, is this company good at what they do? We've talked a little bit about that with Google reviews and recommendations from Facebook.
Yeah.
I want to touch on manufacturer partnerships a little bit. So for instance, at Pro Exteriors, we are a master elite contractor and part of the President's Club with GAF. Could you explain just a little bit about what those manufacturer partnerships really mean? Because I know many of us have seen stickers on the side of trucks. We've seen brag sheets when a homeowner sat down with a salesperson. Can those just be bought? What criteria have to be met? And you can go in as much depth as you want, but just in general, what do those partnerships mean?
So realistically, anytime you see somebody that's certified with a manufacturer or has, a certified installer badge or something along those lines, they can be a great resource to say, like, hey, this is a quality company. They're certified with a manufacturer. So obviously the manufacturer has gone through the vetting process. Typically, it's going to be kind of another check mark to say, like, hey, this is a reputable contractor. Most of those certifications are not what we call pay to play. So most of them are not going to be something that any Joe Smoke contractor can go, hey, I want to get certified with your company. here's $500 for the annual fee, and then I get the, list me on your website and give me some stickers and whatnot. Most of them are not. There are some out there that pretty much play out that way. Again, the same process of $75 in 15 minutes, I can make you a contractor. There's companies out there that will certify me on day one with no proof of insurance, with no proof of me having any sort of knowledge to install their product, no testing, no nothing. So there are companies out there like that. In the instance of because we are a master lead contractor with GAF, I'll use that as kind of a sounding platform. So
Okay.
with the GAF master lead program, there are levels to GAF certified program. So there's a certified contractor, and there's going to be a master elite. With the master elite program, there are requirements as far as like how many years you actually have to be certified with them, how many years you've been in business to even be qualified to be in the certified contractor program. They're going to annually, they're going to check up on your business license. They're going to check up on your insurance, and they're going to do the things that we expect the consumer to do, where they're going to go out there and verify these things. They're going to verify that you're in good standing with your suppliers. They're going to verify you're in good standing with your creditors, and they're going to verify all your insurance and what have you. So dealing with companies like that, if you read into what the actual program entails, it's really easy to figure out whether or not the program is legit. There's other certifications you can get as far as being like a qualified installer for certain products. Those typically require you to do some sort of either book test or hands-on testing. Some require both. Again, if it's a product you're very interested in, it doesn't take much to physically call the 800 number for that company and verify, just what that certification means.
Yeah.
Again, everything looks great on paper. You still have to do your research. Anybody can say I'm this and I'm that. If you don't verify it, then anybody can be anything.
All right, so at this point, we've clicked on a couple of websites from our Google search. We've looked at their social media. We've looked through some of the partnerships that they have listed. When a customer sits down with a salesperson and they explain the job that they're looking to get done, what should that customer expect in return from that salesperson as far as describing the work that is being proposed? Are you looking at like a one-page kind of handwritten description? Are you looking for a printout? How much detail are you looking for?
If they claim it, if they sell it to you verbally, it should be in writing. If they talk about, the certifications that their company has, they should be able to provide it in writing. If they talk about the, their brick and mortar location, the address should be on the contract. If they talk about how great their warranty is, the actual company's warranty, then that warranty should be part of the contract. If they're going to give you multiple options, all that stuff should be all very neat, organized within the contract itself. There's some details that matter and some details that don't. The actual price is very important. You should have a piece of paper that requires not only your signature, but also the contractor's signature that has a actual defined price. If they tell you it's included, it should be written on the contract.
Okay.
Like for roofing, like we're going to replace your roof, and yeah, we normally include like maybe 4 sheets of plywood. If it's not written in that contract, they can still charge you for it. Again, a contract is of utmost importance. Don't ever do anything to your home without having something in writing. So all those little details, 100%, I want the brand that you're using. If you're listing out 10 different products, that you're going to use, they're made by somebody. I want to know the brand. You all know that every single product ever manufactured has a generic version. And, the generic version is not always lesser quality. Sometimes can just be lesser price. But in many cases, there are generic products that are just cheap.
Yeah.
But in theory, they're the same. Specifically talking about like synthetic underlayments for roofing, there are tons of synthetic underlayments. There's synthetic underlayments that can be $34 for a 10 square roll, and there's synthetic underlayments that are $275 for a 10 square roll. They are both synthetic underlayments. So if you have a contract that says like, oh, we're going to install synthetic underlayment, okay, which one? So again, if they take the time to list it out or they talk about specific products during the sales process, when the actual contract gets written, it should have 100% every one of those details listed out. The total price, any potential add-ons, any potential change orders you might run into. Sometimes we can't really put price tags on that stuff. But if it's kind of a very normal thing in your trade to have like this kind of be a normal thing that gets replaced, then, if they have the ability to give you kind of enough for a price so you have the potential to know what the back end would be, that's ideal. Having a signature page is ideal. Again, typically you're going to want both of you to sign. Your signature gives them the proof that you wanted the job done. Some states require both signatures, some states don't. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, the big things are going to be like the warranty information, the product information, and the total price. Those three things are crucial. And, we run across it quite often where people had, very large, multi-tens of thousands of dollar projects where they pretty much had a handshake deal with a guy. Or, their contract was written on a one-page sheet and, 6 months after the project is done, something happens and the guy says, oh, that's not covered under your warranty. Well, how do you know? Because you don't have a copy of the warranty. Well, he said everything was covered. That's obviously not the truth. So if you're relying on it for the long term, then get it in writing.
All right, while we're on the topic of the contract, let's say you're getting ready to sign one with a company and they ask you for a deposit to get things going. That's pretty normal. What is the amount of the deposit or the percentage of the total project cost is within the normal range?
So it very much varies. Some states have laws as far as what you're allowed to legally accept as a deposit. Maryland has laws that are, it can only be a certain percentage of the project. Sometimes it's based upon the total cost of the job. Realistically, anything over a 50% deposit is a ginormous red flag. If somebody wants you to give them, if they're 2 months out and they want a 50% deposit to do a project, that's a ginormous red flag. A lot of this falls under common sense. If you're asking a guy to do a $500 repair to your house and he needs a deposit in order to do it, red flag. Okay. If it's a $10,000 project and the guy's like, I need $7,000 up front, red flag. So my rule of thumb is never pay anybody more than 50% of a deposit. But again, use your best judgment. If you're signing a $50,000 contract and they ask for $25,000 up front, that's a huge red flag. I usually tell people, like, we as a company, we kind of have a benchmark as far as like what we expect to deposit for. Over a certain dollar amount, we're going to expect a deposit. We normally go for 33%. We do that for one of two reasons. Most of the time, like special order material, we want you to pay for any special order material before we order it, because if you cancel the contract, I don't want to be stuck with that stuff.
Yeah.
We make enough mistakes in this business, and over 20 years, you collect a whole warehouse full of mistakes, mismeasured windows, doors, what have you. I don't need you sticking me with that bill if you decide not to follow through with things.
Mm-hmm.
But it more than 33%. I don't see where it's necessary.
And all of that should be also in writing, correct?
100%. Yeah. Not only should it be in writing, but also like what the expectation is as far as what's the next benchmark as far as when they get paid. If I get a third now, and then, in 2 weeks, we're going to start your project. Do I want more money when I show up to begin the project? Do I want all of my money on the back end? Larger projects typically are going to have benchmarks. Once this is done, then we get the next check. Once this is done, we get the next check. Common sense, use your best judgment. Yeah, if the guy's driving around in a $100,000, platinum F-250 or F-350, but he needs your 50% down payment in order to even consider starting this job, red flag.
All right, while we're still on the financial side of things, if a business is willing to offer you financing, is that a pro or a con, or is that just a thing?
So I think financing is a part of every financial decision now. I think more and more people finance more things than we ever have before. So I think that any purchase, realistically, when somebody offers you financing, yeah, I don't see any negatives in regards to that. But again, if you're doing $1,000 project and it's a 26% fee or
Interest
twenty
rate, yeah,
percent rate, then
yeah,
then probably not in your best interest.
yeah.
Um, but no, I think that wise people, people that need the financing, people that don't need the financing. We finance people all the time that obviously could pay for this project, 10 times over and still probably never feel that pinch. And then we deal with clients that ultimately can't do projects without financing. So we offer financing on every single project. I think most service companies offer financing.
All right, and then last question on the financial front: if a company says, "Hey, we are willing to work with your insurance company," red flag, good thing, bad thing?
No. I think that any reputable contractor, especially like in our space, we deal with insurance companies quite often. I think when somebody says like, "Hey, we're willing to work with your insurance company," um, it should kind of take some of the burden off your shoulders. You should kind of get some relief out of that to know that you don't have to be the middleman. But again, with that, there's also some red flags that kind of tie into that. If somebody makes you sign a piece of paper that says like, "Hey, you're choosing us as your contractor," not necessarily a bad thing. If that piece of paper says like, "Hey, if we negotiate for you, and in the end, if you choose to go with somebody else, you still owe us 20% of the contract," I mean, that's a red flag to me.
Yeah.
We as a contractor are here to help people. We offer free consultations. We spend our time with people on a daily basis that we never actually do work with. So I think working with insurance companies is kind of that same thing. So it's telling people like, if we get you approved, you still owe us money. If you don't choose to use us, I think it's bad business in my personal opinion.
So I asked that question knowing what the answer was. I've sat in the office across the hall from you, and
Yeah.
I've heard you speaking with insurance companies on behalf of the homeowner,
Yeah.
and that especially dealing with the exterior of people's homes, dealing with roofing and siding and windows, the things that are often or most often impacted by weather.
Yeah.
Yeah, as a homeowner, I might deal with that one, two times in my lifetime. The exterior contractor, if they're reputable, they're dealing with that kind of work all the time. And so
Yeah.
it should not be a red flag. In fact,
Yeah.
it could be a benefit to you as a consumer.
I mean, we deal with it on a daily basis. So when we have an opportunity to help somebody, work with their insurance company to ultimately get the approval that they're, owed in most situations, we have the documentation. We do it on a daily basis. We ultimately know what the code is. We know what the manufacturer install requires. So all the things that ultimately are needed in order to kind of successfully work a claim, we
Yep.
have all that information. So we could take a claim that might be drug out for months and months and months, and typically we can lessen that time frame by a considerable amount. Um, but yeah, ultimately we're just here to help. We're here to be an advocate for the homeowner. Sometimes there's things that we know that you may not. We see homeowners, I don't want to say get ripped off by their insurance companies all the time, but we definitely see people get taken advantage of.
Shortchanged,
Um,
or yeah. Yeah.
yeah, quite often.
I mean, most reliable contractors will have a list of references that you as the homeowner can contact and say, "Hey, did this
Correct.
company really help you with your insurance claim?" And
Yep.
tell me about that process. So, all right, I think the last thing that I wanted to talk about uh, before I check with you if there were any topics that we didn't hit on was when you meet with a salesperson that's one representative of the company. Most times they are not the one that's going to be doing the work. So there's going to be a
Correct.
crew of some sort on your roof, on the side of your house, in your home, whatever the job requires. What
Correct.
are some of the questions you're asking to get more information about the crew that company utilizes?
Well, so if you're specifically talking about like, are they employees that are going to come out and do the work, or are they going to be a subcontractor? Um, I think when you ask that question, somebody's response, uh, if you're going to use a subcontracting crew, you pretty much know right away. So if somebody stutters and says like, "Oh, well, they're employees," um, but if they stutter and say, well, they're 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 technically employees. They either are or they aren't. How long have they been working for your company? Do you have the same paperwork that we provide to you for business licensing and
Hmm.
insurance and everything else? We as the business owner are required to get that same exact information from any subcontractors. Um, so ultimately, like if somebody wanted proof that you have that insurance, it shouldn't be a really big issue for them to provide that information as well. Um, you're covering the consumer, so any single person that's on that job site, whether they're employer or subcontractor, should be covering the consumer in the same exact fashion. Um, so yeah, so if they're subcontractors, it's not real hard to just request like, hey, can I get the information for your subcontractor? I just want to make sure that he's also properly insured and licensed and whatnot. And then how long have you been working for the company? If a company is a reputable company, typically the subcontractors that they use have been around for years and years and years because they want to continue to do business with those contractors. If you talk to somebody, it's like, yeah, we started working for them a month ago. You know, there's a lot of stuff, a lot of kinks to be worked out when you onboard a new subcontractor. It requires a lot of babysitting, a lot of hands-on training. We personally do hands-on training here in our shop. We do manufacturing training offsite. We do on-job training. Um, it's not just installing things to manufacturing specs, but it's also installing things to our specs,
Right.
our
Yeah.
expectations, because there are times that our expectations and our specifications are going to be more stringent than what the manufacturer requires. Um, we don't install things for today, we install things for ever.
Sure.
So, you know, uh, having that relationship in place and having that proper training, and it shouldn't take much to be able to prove that. Yeah. And then, honestly, like you could chat with the guys while they're on the job site and figure out whether or not it's all true.
And then just this came to mind as you were sharing about that. Is it pretty commonplace for reliable contractors to have a project coordinator, someone who is kind of seeing the job from beginning to end and kind of being the
Yes.
play caller, whatever kind of analogy you want to use?
Yes. Um, so you're always going to have guys that are the installers. Those guys are, looking at directly what's in front of them. They may day to day plan out what they're trying to get done today and tomorrow. But ultimately, having a project coordinator, he's got all the information about the project that might not directly affect the people doing the work,
Hmm.
but it might affect the other people that are going to be doing work there. So, like when you're doing exteriors and you're doing siding, roofing, gutters, and windows and everything else, all of those products kind of work together. But it may be four different people, four different crews installing those products. So a project manager is basically the one that kind of keeps an eye on the job site to make things are being done properly, make sure the install is being done accordingly. They're going to be taking pictures nonstop. They're going to be interacting with the homeowner. They're going to be the ones dealing with permits and inspections. Making sure that stuff's not blowing into the neighbor's yard, making sure the radio's not super loud. Uh, if God forbid there's an incident on a job site where somebody gets hurt, they're going to be the first point of contact for caring for that person and figuring out what needs to be done in order to get them fixed up, and then ultimately reporting back to the business.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, so they're the front line. Once your project is sold, it gets handed off essentially to your project coordinator. They're going to be your point of contact through the majority of the project. Always best to have a project coordinator.
So what I'm hearing you say is if a contracting company, we'll call them a general contractor, utilizes a subcontractor, that is not a red flag. In fact, that is very commonplace in the industry, but it's hugely beneficial to have that bridge between the parent company and the subcontractor in that project coordinator who is
Correct.
Representing. And yeah.
Yep.
All right. So I just want to recap real quick what we've talked about. We've said that word of mouth can be your best friend. You want to check the company out online. Licenses and insurance are a must, but are not all created equal.
Correct.
Manufacturer partnerships can tell you a little bit more. It's another piece of the puzzle. How long has that company been in business? You want to get everything in writing. Don't underestimate your gut. You got to trust your gut. Don't be afraid to ask about the crew. Was there anything else that I said this last week, you are a consumer just as much as anyone else.
Yeah.
Anything else you're looking for when you're looking for a reliable contractor?
You can go into the really, really nitty gritty of the details, and you can say, how do they show up to the job site? Are they dressed appropriately? Do their clothes have holes and stains, or do they have a company shirt on versus just are they wearing a heavy metal T-shirt, an Orioles shirt, what have you? What's their vehicle look like? You can always do the test of saying walking out to the person's vehicle and looking into the person's vehicle typically is going to tell you kind of how they're going to treat your home. A clean vehicle typically means they're going to probably keep your home pretty tidy. If you go out to their house and it's like, 3 weeks worth of, fast food bags and, 9-year-old business cards stuffed up in the dashboard, and it looks like it hasn't been vacuumed since they bought the thing. That person doesn't care for their own stuff. So asking them or expecting them more or less to care for your own property is a little risky. So so those little details can often tell you a lot. Not always to say that the person's a bad person. It's just those are the little things you have to make up in your mind how much weight they hold. So.
Yep. Okay. Goodness, that's a lot. That's a lot to take in. I'm grateful that there's a pause button on these podcasts, and you can rewind as you need to. Aaron, thank you for being the expert and for sharing all the information that's jangling around up there in that noggin of yours. Appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you, Cole.
All right, everybody, that is all we have for the You Ask the Pros Answer podcast. Before we go, we want to hear from you. Is there a question that you have surrounding any kind of an exterior home project that might be coming up? We want to hear from you. Would you email us at info@askproexteriors.com and place You Ask in the subject there? We just want to hear from you. We want this to be a conversation each week. Remember, if you're facing an upcoming home project, we hope this episode empowered you to tackle it with confidence. Remember, knowledge is power, and a little research can go a long way. Until next time, happy home owning. The You Ask the Pros Answer podcast is produced in-house by the Pro Exteriors team. Pro Exteriors is the exterior contracting division of Empire Construction Group, LLC. This podcast is intended for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal advice. For more answers to your questions, please subscribe to this channel and podcast so you'll never miss an episode. Do you have an upcoming home remodeling project? Find more answers to your questions at askproexteriors.com.